When people hear the phrase drug shortage, a wave of panic often follows. It's an almost instinctive response because we've been conditioned to believe that medicine is a constant, a guaranteed safety net always waiting for us on the pharmacy shelf. But when that assumption is challenged, fear fills the space where certainty once lived. The first step to regaining control in moments like these is not to let panic dictate the story, but instead to understand the reality behind what is happening. Knowledge doesn't just give us information, it gives us power, and with power comes calm. Drug shortages are not random acts of chaos. They do not signal the collapse of medicine or the disappearance of all treatments. They have causes, patterns, and most importantly, solutions that are often being worked on behind the scenes before the public even knows there is a problem. When people lack this perspective, fear becomes exaggerated. What begins as a temporary supply issue can quickly snowball into emotional distress, with patients and families imagining worst-case scenarios. That is the psychology of panic, when the mind fills the unknown with dread. And so, the antidote is to replace the unknown with understanding. Consider this. The majority of drug shortages are linked to factors like manufacturing delays, raw material scarcity, or sudden spikes in demand, such as during a severe flu season. Other times, a factory might fail a quality inspection and need to halt production for safety reasons. These events don't mean the medicine is gone forever. They mean that the flow is disrupted. Picture a river. If a log blocks its current, the water slows or diverts, but the river doesn't dry up. The same is true here. Most shortages are temporary blockages in the supply chain, not permanent droughts. Once people grasp this truth, the fear of the unknown begins to fade. The trouble is that when panic spreads faster than facts, it creates a second crisis. We saw this during the pandemic, people hoarding medications they didn't need, leaving shelves empty for those who truly did. Panic distorts reality and magnifies scarcity. By contrast, calm creates space for logic. When patients know that alternatives often exist, that doctors and pharmacists are trained to navigate these very challenges, they can replace anxiety with trust. Trust that medicine is not a single pill, but a system with options, backups, and creative solutions. This doesn't mean that shortages are trivial. They are serious, and they demand attention. But seriousness is not the same as hopelessness. We can be aware of a problem without being consumed by it. Think about how firefighters are trained. They walk into flames, not because they are fearless, but because they understand the fire. They know how it behaves, where it spreads, how it can be contained. Their calm doesn't come from ignoring danger. It comes from understanding it deeply. In the same way, when we learn about the reasons for shortages, when we grasp the patterns, we find that calm becomes not just possible, but natural. Another key to staying calm is to recognize that you are not alone in this. Behind every headline about a shortage, there are teams of professionals working tirelessly, manufacturers scaling up production, pharmacists finding alternatives, physicians adjusting treatments. Shortages may feel like personal crises, but in truth they are collective challenges being addressed by entire systems. Knowing this allows us to shift our mindset from helplessness to reassurance. There are people working on this problem, and it is not ours to solve alone. It is also worth reflecting on the psychology of our relationship with medicine. Many of us view prescriptions as the ultimate symbol of safety and control. When access feels threatened, it shakes something deeper than just our routine. It shakes our sense of security. That is why panic feels so natural. But this is also an invitation to grow in resilience. It is a reminder that our health is not defined by a single bottle of pills, but by the broader strength of our bodies, our habits, our relationships with caregivers, and our ability to adapt. Shortages can challenge us to expand our definition of health beyond the narrow focus of having the exact drug at the exact time. They invite us to see health as flexibility, knowledge, and partnership. In moments of uncertainty, we have a choice to let fear spiral or to ground ourselves in understanding. The difference between panic and calm is not the situation itself, but the story we tell about it. If we tell ourselves, this shortage means disaster, panic takes over. If we tell ourselves, this shortage is a disruption, but not the end and solutions exist, calm follows. So the first step to staying calm during drug shortages is not to ignore the headlines, but to face them with clarity. Ask questions, learn the reasons, understand the patterns. The more light you shine on the problem, the less room there is for fear to grow. Because fear thrives in the dark, but calm grows in the presence of truth. And so, if you remember nothing else, remember this: don't let panic write the story of your health. Shortages will come and go, but your response, your calm, your clarity, your trust can remain steady. And that steadiness may be the most powerful medicine of all. When fear begins to settle, the next step is to shift from reaction to preparation. Staying calm during drug shortages isn't about pretending the problem doesn't exist. It's about meeting the challenge with foresight and practical steps that reduce uncertainty. Preparation is the antidote to helplessness. When you know what to do before a crisis strikes, you take control of the narrative rather than letting panic dictate your response. And in a time when shortages have become increasingly common, this proactive mindset isn't optional. It's essential. Think of preparation as a kind of psychological insurance. Just as you wouldn't drive without a seatbelt or keep your home without some form of emergency plan, you shouldn't approach your health without a strategy for what to do when your medicine isn't available. The truth is, many people don't consider this until they're standing at the pharmacy counter and the pharmacist says, "We're out of stock." In that moment, the brain races, anxiety rises, and rational thinking can disappear. But if you've prepared, even in small, simple ways, that stressful moment transforms into one of manageable inconvenience rather than crisis. One of the most basic, yet powerful, steps is maintaining open communication with your healthcare team. Too often, patients view doctors and pharmacists as transactional figures. You go in, get your prescription, and leave. But in reality, they are partners, allies who can provide options you might not even know exist. If you take a daily medication, ask in advance, what are the alternatives if this drug isn't available? That single question shifts you from a place of dependence to empowerment. Suddenly, you're not just waiting for shortages to catch you off guard. You're aware of possible substitutions and plans. Preparation also means becoming an active steward of your own prescriptions. It sounds simple, but many patients wait until the last pill is swallowed before calling in for a refill. This behavior, while common, creates unnecessary vulnerability. Instead, make it a habit to refill early, keeping a buffer supply whenever possible. Think of it like keeping an extra gallon of clean water at home. You may never need it, but if disruption happens, you'll be glad it's there. These small acts of foresight transform panic into confidence. There is also a deeper, often overlooked layer of preparation strengthening the body so that it isn't as fragile when medication supply wavers. I'm not suggesting that healthy living replaces necessary prescriptions, far from it. But when you invest in lifestyle habits, eating nutritious foods, staying active, managing stress, and sleeping well, you are fortifying your system. You are giving yourself resilience. In times of shortage, that resilience matters. A strong foundation doesn't eliminate the need for medicine, but it gives you more stability while adjustments are being made. Preparation here is not only external about supply, but internal about your body's capacity to cope. Equally important is the mental preparation for navigating uncertainty. Most people underestimate how much their mindset affects their health outcomes. If you approach a shortage with panic, your stress hormones rise, your sleep suffers, and your body becomes more vulnerable. But if you approach it with calm and preparation, you preserve energy for problem solving and cooperation with your care team. This is why preparation isn't just about pills. It's about training the mind to see challenges as manageable. Think of it like a muscle. The more you practice responding with calm strategies, the stronger that muscle becomes. Preparation also has a collective dimension. Families and communities can prepare together. Imagine a parent teaching their child not only how to take medication, but also how to ask questions, how to recognize alternatives, how to advocate for themselves. Imagine neighbors sharing knowledge about which local pharmacies have better track records for supply, or support groups offering tips on managing during shortages. This collective preparation turns what might feel like an isolated struggle into a shared journey. And shared journeys always lighten the emotional load. Now, there is a philosophical truth underpinning all of this. Preparation is a form of freedom. Panic enslaves you to the moment, to the worst case scenario. Preparation liberates you from that prison of fear. It doesn't mean you can control everything. It means you can meet whatever comes with confidence, adaptability, and grace. It is the difference between stumbling in the dark and walking with a lantern. The room may still be the same, but your experience of it is completely transformed. And so, when we think about staying calm during drug shortages, remember this calm does not appear out of thin air. It is cultivated step by step through preparation. It is built in the conversations you have with your doctor, in the small stock you keep in your cabinet, in the healthy habits you practice each day, and in the mindset you carry into moments of uncertainty. Preparation makes calm not a fleeting feeling, but a steady companion. If panic is fueled by surprise, preparation is fueled by awareness. And awareness is always within your reach. The time to prepare is not when the shelves are empty. It is now, while you still have choices and clarity. Because when you are prepared, you do not just survive a shortage, you rise above it. So let me leave you with this. Calm is not an accident, it's a decision. And preparation is how you make that decision real. The more you prepare, the less fear has power over you. And when fear loses power, you gain something priceless, the freedom to face any challenge with strength, clarity, and peace. When we move past the initial panic and embrace preparation, the next great challenge is adaptability. Because even with the best preparation, the world will continue to surprise us. No plan can be airtight, no system flawless, and that is especially true in the uncertain landscape of drug shortages. Adaptability is the ability to bend without breaking, to shift without losing our sense of stability. It's not about controlling every variable. It's about mastering the art of adjusting when circumstances change. And this quality is just as vital to our health as the medicines we rely on. Adaptability begins in the mind. It is a willingness to say, if this option isn't available, I will consider another path. Too often, we become fixed on the idea that only one solution will work, that the specific pill in the specific bottle is the only lifeline. But when we cling too tightly to rigid expectations, we set ourselves up for unnecessary suffering. The truth is that medicine is rarely a single road. It is a network of pathways. When one is blocked, another may lead us to the same destination, even if it looks different than we imagined. Adaptability is what allows us to walk those alternate roads without losing our balance. Take, for example, the concept of alternative medications. A shortage does not necessarily mean the treatment itself disappears. It may simply mean it arrives in another form, another brand, another dosage. Yet for many patients, hearing that their usual prescription isn't available triggers deep anxiety as though all options have vanished. Adaptability is the skill of reframing that moment, of asking, what else can work? What substitutions are safe? How can I achieve the same effect through another route? And this is where trust in your physician or pharmacist becomes critical. Their expertise can guide you toward adjustments that keep your care on track even when circumstances force a detour. Adaptability also applies to lifestyle. If a drug that manages blood pressure becomes scarce, it's an opportunity to double down on the natural supports for heart health, dietary adjustments, reducing salt, adding movement, practicing relaxation. If a medication for anxiety is in short supply, it may be the moment to explore complementary practices like mindfulness, breathing exercises, or counseling. These aren't replacements in every case, but they are reinforcements. Adaptability allows us to lean on these supports more heavily when medical supply is uncertain, creating a bridge until full access is restored. There is a psychological liberation in embracing adaptability. When you cultivate flexibility, you break free from the illusion that security lies in everything staying the same. Because the truth is, nothing in life stays the same. Our bodies change, our needs change, the world around us changes. If we define peace as the absence of change, we doom ourselves to a constant state of disappointment. But if we define peace as the ability to navigate change with creativity and grace, we discover a deeper, more lasting resilience. Philosophers have long pointed out that rigidity is a form of weakness, while flexibility is a sign of strength. A tree that refuses to bend in the wind is uprooted. A tree that sways survives the storm. Our health and our mindset during shortages operates on the same principle. When we allow ourselves to bend, to adapt, we not only survive the shortage, we may even discover strengths and strategies we would have overlooked otherwise. That is the paradox of adaptability. It emerges from challenge, but it leaves us stronger than we were before. Adaptability also invites us to see the bigger picture. Shortages remind us that health is not only about the individual, it is about the system we all participate in. When we adapt, we make space for others to adapt as well. For instance, when one patient agrees to accept an alternative medication, it may free up supply for someone else who has no alternatives available. Adaptability, then, is not just personal, it is communal. It becomes an act of compassion, a way of recognizing that our flexibility can ease the burden for someone else. In this sense, adaptability connects us, reminding us that we are not isolated patients but members of a shared health community. And so, adaptability is more than a skill, it is a philosophy of living. It teaches us that while we cannot stop the winds of change, we can learn to sail with them. We can reframe shortage not as the end of control, but as the beginning of creativity. The resilient person doesn't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" but rather, How can I respond in a way that preserves my health and my peace of mind? That question changes everything. Ultimately, drug shortages test not only our bodies, but our spirits. They challenge us to move beyond panic, beyond rigid expectations, into a space where we trust our ability to adapt. And when we prove to ourselves that we can adapt, that we can find alternatives, strengthen our lifestyle, work with our doctors, and support our communities, we emerge not weaker, but stronger. That is the hidden gift in these challenges. They reveal capacities within us that we might never have otherwise discovered. So the message here is clear: adaptability is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It is the bridge between preparation and resilience. It is the mindset that keeps you steady when the world feels unsteady. And it is the reminder that your power lies not in things remaining the same, but in your ability to transform with change. Let me leave you with this thought. It is not the strongest who thrive, nor the most rigid, but the most adaptable. In learning to bend, you do not break. You discover that flexibility, not certainty, is the true foundation of calm in times of uncertainty. And that discovery may be the most important medicine of all. We've talked about preparation, about adaptability, and about building resilience in the face of drug shortages. But there's a final, often overlooked piece to this puzzle: the importance of community and communication. Because no matter how strong we are as individuals, there is a limit to how far we can go on our own. When shortages occur, the difference between panic and peace is often found not in the medicine itself, but in the network of people around us and in the way we share and receive information. Think about how panic begins. It usually doesn't start with the actual shortage. It starts with the fear of the unknown. A patient goes to the pharmacy. The medication isn't available, and suddenly the mind races. What now? Am I at risk? Will I go without treatment? Is anyone going to help me? And in that void of uncertainty, rumors grow, fear multiplies, and people begin to feel isolated. That isolation, more than the shortage itself, creates the sense of helplessness that eats away at our calm. Now imagine that same patient, but with a trusted network in place. A doctor who communicates clearly about alternatives, a pharmacist who reassures them about expected timelines, a support group where others are sharing their experiences, and a community that emphasizes calm over chaos. The shortage is still real, but the fear is contained. Why? Because information is flowing. Trust is present. The person doesn't feel alone in the struggle. This is why communication is not simply a convenience. It's a lifeline. When patients, providers, and institutions communicate openly, fear has less room to grow. And it works both ways. Patients need to feel empowered to ask questions, to share their concerns without shame, and to keep track of their medications with honesty. Doctors and pharmacists, in turn, have the responsibility to provide clarity, to avoid medical jargon that confuses more than it enlightens, and to treat every patient's fear with dignity. Communication builds a bridge between uncertainty and understanding, but community takes this further. Community is what happens when individuals join together, not just for themselves, but for one another. During shortages, communities that thrive are those where people look out for their neighbors, share resources responsibly, and resist the urge to hoard. A sense of shared responsibility replaces the anxiety of competition. It becomes less about me versus you, and more about us together. There's a profound psychological truth here. Human beings were never designed to endure crisis alone. From the earliest days of civilization, survival depended on the strength of the group. Food, shelter, protection, all of it was more secure when shared. Shortages remind us of that ancient truth. They are not just a challenge to our supply chains, they are a challenge to our sense of solidarity. And when we rise to meet that challenge by leaning on community, by trusting one another, we discover that the human spirit is larger than any one prescription bottle. This also means resisting the modern temptation towards silence and withdrawal. When fear strikes, many people retreat inward. They don't want to worry their families, they don't want to admit they're struggling, or they assume no one will understand. But silence isolates, and isolation magnifies fear. On the other hand, speaking up, sharing concerns with loved ones, joining community forums, asking your healthcare provider directly, creates connection, and connection is the antidote to panic. I would even go further and say that shortages are an invitation to strengthen the social fabric we often take for granted. They push us to check in on the elderly neighbor who might not have access to information online. They remind us to advocate for transparency in healthcare policy so that patients aren't blindsided by changes. They encourage us to teach our children about empathy, about sharing in times of need, about the power of calm communication when others are spiraling. there's a philosophical lesson here as well. Panic is isolating. Calm is connecting. Panic says, I am alone in this struggle and I must protect myself. Calm says, I am part of something larger and together we will get through this. Which of those perspectives do you think brings more peace of mind, more dignity, more strength? The answer is obvious, and yet it takes conscious effort to choose the latter. The beauty of community is that it doesn't erase the problem, but it makes the problem lighter to carry. A shortage can be frightening, but when we face it together, with honest communication, with trust, with compassion, the fear loses its grip. Instead of spiraling downward, we create a spiral upward where each act of openness strengthens another, and resilience becomes not just an individual trait, but a shared force. So the next time you hear about a shortage, ask yourself not only, how can I prepare? How can I adapt? But also, who can I connect with? Who can I support? Who can I turn to for clarity? Because the real medicine in those moments is not just in the pill, it is in the bond between people. Let me leave you with this. When the supply of medicine runs thin, the supply of human compassion and connection must run thicker. Shortages remind us that our deepest strength does not come from the shelves of a pharmacy, but from the hearts and voices of one another. And that is something no shortage can ever take away.